Welcome to Conversations with the Candidates. I'm your host, Eve Noss, for this section. And today I'm interviewing Estelle Rand, who's running for Ward 2 City Councilor. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with asking you why you're running.
Well, first of all, the seat is open, which is a big help. I don't think I would have taken on an incumbent like Wes Slate at the moment. So the seat opened up, and I saw it as my opportunity to continue supporting and contributing to Ward 2 and Beverly in general. I've been serving the community for the past few years through the farmers market and my participation in various boards and committees in town and across the state actually too. So this was my opportunity to expand my contribution to Beverly.
So I think most people know about you. I know I only know about you in conjunction with the farmers market, but I hear that you're active with a lot of other Beverly issues and boards and things. And so can you tell us a little bit about your background? I think that would be interesting to hear about.
From the beginning?
As far back as you want to
go. Well, I've been living in Beverly for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I grew up in New Hampshire. Before that, I was living in Topsfield. So I came to Beverly because I could be one block from the train, the beach, and the library, which I think is just a huge asset to our downtown and just any citizen of Beverly. Let's see. I'm sorry. What was?
So what else? What else have you been involved with?
Okay.
Yeah.
So other than the farmers market, I sit on the board for Harbor Light Nursery School.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of a group that was founded by the North Shore United Way called Women in Action. I received grants through Women in Action for the farmers market that supports our kind of our incentive programs for people to use food stamps at the market. I also, in the city here, I'm also on 30 in Main, which is a group that's associated with Beverly Main Streets. It's for people 40 and under, so my days are numbered on that committee, but I'm happy to have been part of it. It's a nice group that's really cultivating the younger leaders in our city. So
it's part of Beverly Main Streets?
It is, yeah.
And what does 30 in Main do?
30 in Main, the mission is to really rejuvenate and add to the vision, the 2020 vision of Beverly Main Streets, the 2020 plan, by also cultivating these younger people who have shown leadership in the community. So we did things like, I was on a speaker series subcommittee, so we brought in people to talk to us, to 30 in Mainers, about different skill sets that would help you be a better community leader, would help you give back to your community. And it's specifically geared towards building the downtown, like the arts district, small businesses, and getting involved with your local government.
Mm-hmm.
So.
So what do you think downtown needs exactly?
I think the major issue of downtown is actually the walkability of our city has been, Beverly is very walkable. And I just think that the city and Main Streets and all of us could work harder to bring that out a little bit more so that it's obvious. We need to make it easier for people to make the choice to walk and use smaller forms of transportation and alternative forms of transportation, like zip cars, bicycles, mopeds. Especially, there's a lot of development that's happening now, especially on Rantoul Street. And one of the major issues of surrounding neighborhoods that are affected by this development is parking.
Right.
So I think there's this we're at this interesting point where Beverly kind of can choose to act more like a city, or more like, keep that suburban mentality. I think that the city could work with people and the resources we have already to make very simple changes that would alleviate some of that parking fear and traffic concerns and bring out the walkability of the city so that businesses downtown will thrive more. And I mean, generally speaking, people will be more community oriented if they're walking and seeing one another on the street.
And things are more accessible.
Yeah.
So before we go on, I meant to ask you in the beginning, what could you define Ward 2 for us?
Ward 2.
In terms of the geographic aspect.
The way I explain it when I'm knocking on doors for simplicity's sake is I refer to Ward 2 as sort of the peninsula, where it goes from the bridge and then out to Rantoul Street up to Federal, and then kind of angles its way up to West Dane and then down to the beach and back to the bridge.
To Dane Street Beach.
Right. So that's a very easy boundary to understand. There's some streets where only half the street is Ward 2, and you know.
Is that true of Rantoul? So is it one side of Rantoul but not the other, or all of
well,
that whole area?
It's up to Federal Street on Rantoul.
Okay. So so what is at the top of your agenda? If you were elected, you could mention more than one thing.
Okay, that's good.
I'm sure there are some things that you wouldn't be running unless there are some things that you were itching to work on.
Yeah, well, bringing out the walkability of Beverly is huge, and since I just spoke about that, I don't have to speak more on it. But the other thing I'd really like to see is a higher level of communication between City Hall and in my case, it would be the people in Ward 2. One of the things that's been missing that I've really noticed on the campaign trail is the Ward 2 Civic Association. It hasn't been active in quite some time now, and I think that's a really great place for city councilors to connect with their constituents. And it's a great place for people to address issues that are more neighborly and not so much like, you know, you don't have to get to the point where you go down to City Hall. You can sort of address it in a very easy to manage way with your neighbors and friends, and your city councilor can then address those issues.
Does Ward 2 have a building?
It doesn't, and that's part of exactly why the Civic Association has sort of drifted away, because there's no school in Ward 2 other than St. Mary's. So that's part of the problem, which is an interesting result of closing schools, but
and turning them into other types of buildings.
Yeah. But there are a lot of the, you know, like the American Legion and the Franco and which other one? I think the Elks. Yeah, those. The ICC is just outside of Ward 2, but all of those other clubs are in Ward 2, and the City Hall is in Ward 2. So there could be a place to meet. I think that would be easy.
Is there a history of people meeting someplace in Ward 2?
They used to meet at the school.
Oh, the Edward School.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
maybe they still have a meeting room there.
Yeah. So that's at the top.
Right.
Building
so communication?
Yes, building communication and just bringing back that sense of accessibility to your city councilor. One of the things that I think sets me apart is that my business is here in Beverly, which is the farmers market. And so I have, and my children are both in school. They're from 7:30 to 2 in the afternoon. So I have a very big chunk of time to commit to potholes and getting the Civic Association working again, just being part of City Hall and seeing different city leaders throughout the day. So that level of communication is really possible with me.
So how much time do you think you'd be, I was just going to ask you, how much time do you think you'd be able to devote to it? So you've answered that.
Yeah.
So pretty much the middle of the day, you're out and about and you're available.
Right.
And evenings.
It would, essentially, I would be treating this as my job. So in addition to being a small business owner.
So for people who aren't familiar with you, what would you say your style is?
My style?
Your personal style in terms of meeting and greeting people and running a meeting perhaps, and it sounds like you've done a lot of things in terms of bringing people together to create something or
yes,
make something that exists already work better.
Yeah. So I would say that my main focus when I'm working with people is to collaborate. And that's something you learn from working with nonprofits a lot of the times, because not everybody has to do everything. If one organization is doing something well, then let's work together and do it even better. So collaboration is a collaborative perspective is part of my style. The other thing is, I think it's just really important to, as far as running a meeting goes, it's very important to leave your personal agenda at the door, to come in with a focus on your mission or goal so that people can work together without really interjecting with these kind of personal histories or judgments to negatively affect your process.
So that would lead somebody to think more in terms of the global needs of the city or your ward rather than the needs of their own family.
Right.
Which may be shared as part of that, but
Right.
that's not what you're saying is the first thing that you think about.
Right.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you about budget and fiscal responsibility. So I don't know actually if ward councilors have a say over that. You vote, right?
Right.
So the city council and mayor are responsible for making decisions about roughly $105 million. And I think people would like to know what specific skills you may have to have some sort of knowledge or qualification about understanding and dealing with a budget process.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay.
It's a big budget and not one that I've never handled a budget of that size before, but as a responsible board member of multiple boards of directors, I think right now I actually am responsible for reviewing 3 separate budgets from 3 separate organizations. So what that means is that I don't have to build the budget, and I can make decisions that help build the budget or change the budget, but I'm responsible for approving and for having a critical eye on that budget to see from year to year where the money's going, how the money changes from line item to line item, if there's a place that there's money being lost or there's a place where money could be gained. So I've been doing that for quite a few years now, and that's, reviewing budgets is a normal part of my life, actually, including having my own business. So, which does not have a huge budget, and one could actually argue that it's harder to manage a small budget than it is a large budget.
That can be true.
In certain situations.
Right.
But, yeah.
So, and you mentioned earlier that you've also had experience with grant writing.
I have.
So
Yeah.
have you thought about grants that might help the city?
Yeah, actually,
your ward?
I'm on the Solid Waste Management Committee, and as a committee, we've applied for a couple of grants already that would help the city. There are a lot of grant opportunities out there, especially for things like training, and also in 2014, all of the schools will be required to have compost as part of their daily removal of waste. That will be required by the state. And one of the things the Solid Waste Management Committee has done is to work with other groups in the city to make sure that we're ready for that. So there's a lot of money out there for adding composting services to your city, which now is the time to go for that money, because when it becomes mandatory, everyone will be going for that.
Right. The
grant.
competition will be stiffer. So what do you think in terms of the city budget are the most critical factors in terms of having a balanced city budget?
The most critical factors for a balanced city budget, other than being knowledgeable about each line item and the history of each line item, what I'll need to do as a city councilor is to see where money can be saved. And I already mentioned that I'm on the Solid Waste Management Committee, but I think that things like large contracts that go out, our waste contract is one of the largest contracts that we have that affects the the entire city. When it comes to those large contracts, I think that it would be beneficial to include people that it's their focus to manage that system, not necessarily the money. But if we have these people who are managing the system involved in the contracts, then I think we'll have more opportunity to get a better contract for either more services or for less cost to the city.
Because you're using somebody's expertise
exactly
to weigh it. Any other budgetary issues that you're aware of or concerned about for the city or for your ward?
Only that I do hear a lot right now how important it is to generate tax revenue and to pay for new structure and capital improvements in the city. So that's going to be an interesting process to really find out where does that money come from and what are the options.
So in light of that, I'm skipping ahead in my list, but
Okay.
do you have any comments on the vote that was taken this week about the Brimble Avenue project? Because one of the things that's been talked about is that the reason that it was voted in was because it was one of the few ways of generating income.
Right.
As well as taking care of traffic issues by moving the interchange around.
Yes. So you want to know just
What's
what
your
I
feeling?
think about the vote?
Well, not about the vote, but about the, well, maybe, or the opportunity to view that or not as, is it a good opportunity or a false opportunity in terms of revenue?
I think it will bring revenue. I personally would rather see something that generates jobs that are above minimum wage, to bring in that revenue. I think that benefits the city more than having a shopping plaza, personally. But, yeah.
Interesting answer. Okay. So in terms of development, what are the kinds of issues that you think we should, that you would want to keep in mind, that the city should keep in mind when evaluating a development project? So you just mentioned one thing, which is the types of jobs that would be involved, and whether it's a minimum wage or a living wage,
Right.
or higher,
Right.
hopefully higher
Yes.
than living wage. So what other kinds of things would you use to sort of evaluate development?
I think, especially for this question, I really think about Rantoul Street, which is just beginning to undergo huge changes. I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see a really different face on Rantoul Street, which is exciting to me. Things like the MBTA garage are a really positive development in Beverly. Some of the housing development, I think it's not a bad thing. Change is going to happen, and I just think for me, my role as a city councilor, I would hope would be to really bring the focus of those developments to on a design level, and on you want it to be equitable, but also on a capacity level. I would like both the capacity and the design of the developments to really retain the character of Beverly, and to really hold on to the positive aspects of those neighborhoods and keep it feeling like a neighborhood. So to me, those are the most important things in development right now, especially housing development.
There's sometimes danger with housing developments, right?
There is,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think it's important to really consider, if you put up a box with small hallways and a parking garage, are those people really active in our community? Are the people moving here to that space really going to engage in downtown Beverly and with each other and add to the community?
Right.
So, and I think there are ways of design and structure that can facilitate that kind of community.
So, and by the word danger, I mean, I think in terms of, the danger of people isolating themselves and not engaging.
Right.
So,
I agree.
or a lack of opportunity in terms of assets and stuff.
Right.
So, okay. So if elected, how would you see yourself being involved? I'm going to go back to the Brimble Avenue project for a second.
Okay.
What do you see as the pros and cons of it? And how do you see yourself as a city councilor being engaged in the process as the project progresses?
Well, first, I would definitely have a seat on the committee that was proposed to manage the process of this whole Brimble Ave reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I think the most important thing is just to be informed, to be at the table. It's work to find out all these points where you can get information, but if you're at the table every time, you're going to have a full picture of what's going on. I think that the pros of the Brimble Ave project are that I don't know if you're familiar with the Department of Transportation complete street designs. That's
Nope.
sort of a new word, complete streets. It means that you're going to design a street with every type of use in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Pedestrians, bicycles, large trucks, regular old cars. So that's how the Department of Transportation builds at this point.
Statewide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really positive to open up. That could potentially make Brimble Avenue a safer place to walk, which I think would be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
The other pro would be that the folks who live in the North Ridge homes would have access to fresh food more easily. So right now, if you don't have a car, you would have to find public transportation or walk quite a distance
Mm-hmm.
to get fresh food. So those are positive. The negative, I think, has been said in so many different ways, but I think it will just increase the traffic in that area. And I don't think that I don't think the Montserrat train stop can handle that. That just comes to mind immediately. Having driven to the Y at 9 o'clock in the morning, it's not easy. So
8 o'clock either.
right.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the waterfront, which
Okay.
is in your area. What do you think needs to be done down there?
Well, so the waterfront, and do you mean the harbor side or the river or both?
Whichever you'd like
Okay.
to talk to.
Which is one of the things I
Speak
love
to.
about Ward 2, actually. To me, it's one of the
Mhm.
most exciting wards. You have the downtown area, and you have Montserrat Art College, and then you have this beautiful river and a beautiful harbor side, and the beaches, too. So I have a couple visions for both the river side and for the harbor side.
So when you say river, you're talking about like behind Moynihan Lumber and the bowling
Exactly,
alley?
right.
Okay.
Exactly. So, yeah, my vision for the harbor front is to really, and I mean like the pier, the public
McDonald's
exactly
area.
Exactly. I'd like to see that area maintain a balance of recreational boaters, a public walkway, also the recreational fishermen who go on the pier there.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that balance, retained. And the Harbor Management Authority does a great job with coming up with plans for that area.
Mm-hmm.
I think that as a city councilor, it would be really wise to talk to them and say, what's your plan? They're the experts. They're the ones who are focused on that area. So I think that's sort of been, that connection has been missing a little bit with some city committees and what happens.
That
So-
group has been left out. Those groups have been left out.
Yeah, I think their recommendations are not taken as seriously as they could be.
Mm-hmm.
So given that they've worked for years, and different, I don't mean just them, but I mean a lot of different city committees have that same experience where they're dedicated and they focus on a project, and their recommendation sometimes is disregarded. But my vision for the waterfront, though, is to make sure that whatever goes in there is accessible for all of Beverly. I think that, again, I would choose to bring out the walkability rather than argue about parking.
Mm-hmm.
I think that parking is important for folks who cannot walk or live, miles away.
Mm-hmm.
But I think otherwise, what's going to generate the buzz about that area is to be able to walk down there and enjoy it. So,
do you have a vision of what would be actually there?
I do. Actually,
would you like to share?
I guess I would. Yeah, I picture something very simple. I picture something that includes a small museum that brings out our maritime history, or oceanography. And then I also picture a small space where you could get a deli sandwich or a cup of coffee or an ice cream, and sort of like outside seating, really welcoming to families, students, elderly, people who are just going to walk down there, and maybe they don't live right on the water, so they can enjoy it right there. Something accessible to the recreational boaters, and something that the fishermen could also enjoy.
So those three populations are what you have in mind.
Yeah, just something very simple. And like I said, I don't think it's important to have parking for that. I think it's important to encourage walking down there. And I mean, in the far future, I picture having a public transportation stop right there. Like maybe the trolley comes over the bridge, or maybe the CATA stops there and on its way around town.
Which would take care of the parking, because the parking could be someplace else.
Right.
Yeah. What about the schools?
The schools. So I feel we're very lucky in Beverly because as a city, we have very few of the problems that many cities have with their schools. Or especially right now, my children are in the elementary school. They're in Cove. And the elementary schools are fantastic. So I think when you're starting with a base, that's fantastic. That just carries on education-wise. So I'm excited for the new middle school. I think that was a long time coming. And we have a new high school. So I think really, honestly, Mayor Scanlon has done a great job of lining the schools up structurally, and just helping to keep them, working with the school committee to keep them strong. My concerns would be that right now we're at maximum capacity, actually, at the elementary school level, and actually at the middle school level too, I believe.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Since they combined the two schools.
Yeah. So that's my concern, and I do find it interesting that I think that's the first time in 15 years that that's happened. So we're seeing a growth in families in Beverly, which is exciting, but also needs to be monitored. And there's no better time for a new middle school than now, I would say.
Okay. We're just about finished. We're just about out of time. Do you want to just give us a sentence or two about why I should vote for you?
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, I think one of the things that I really try and impart on people is that I've been leading the community for the past few years. I have relationships with the city council, with the mayor, with department heads, many of the businesses and nonprofits in town, and though they're cultivated relationships, and people still smile when they see me coming, so that's a plus.
They don't run and hide.
No, not yet. So I think that's really important to have somebody who's actually been working in this system and achieving things in this system for a while now. Not only that, but if you think of the farmers market as just sort of as a project in itself, I had a vision for something and I made it happen. So to me, that's very important.
And you grew it from what it was in Alice Square.
Yeah, and it's not just that it's a farmers market, it's that it's this really altering community event that I envisioned and made happen. So I think that what someone can know from that is that I will apply that to being a city councilor and just carrying out this high level of communication to build a vision and make it happen. So
okay,
yeah.
Very good. Well, we've been talking to Estelle Rand. She's running for Ward 2 City Councilor, the spot that's left by Wes Slate, who's running for mayor. Thank you very much. It was
Thank
great
you.
to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Eve Noss, and this is Conversations with the Candidates.